Hey Queenagers, nice to see you this morning. This is the Queenager newsletter for August the 16th. It's absolutely baking as I read this out. So it's the mercury where I am is creeping towards 36 degrees. That's nearly 100 Fahrenheit. Here I am in North London. Everything feels sticky. There's a kind of haze and the heat is like a solid presence. My office here is right next to a terrace just out there, and usually the door to outside is open. I love the breeze and watching the trees. Today though, the door is firmly shut and the blinds are down against the intensity of the temperature. I usually have my fan on, but I've had to turn it off to record this, so I really have been sweating in front of my computer. And as I do that, I can't get out of my mind the image of the sun I saw through my special geek glasses during the eclipse, an orange fireball cupping the blackness of the moon, the flames blasting out all around it, even at 90%. The sun's light was so strong, it was impossible to look at. I actually took a photograph of it, which I put in the newsletter, and I thought it might break my phone. And in the area of the totality, the power of the sun was even clearer. I was sent this video by, amazing video taken by the 85-year-old father of a friend of mine in Spain, who was there during the total eclipse. My 5-year-old niece said that the way the moon moved across the sun was like a Pac-Man. She's right, a kind of incremental munching of the light, but then the sun explodes back full of power. And there's something about the heat and then that kind of orangeness of the sun. The eclipse felt very profound to me. Maybe because of staring at the sun for so long during what is the hottest summer ever here in the UK. But it feels bigger than that. And maybe it feels that we truly are, as all the astrologers are saying, entering a new era. If you're interested in the astrology, check out Pan Gregory. But this new era, it's like we've all been sleepwalking, reading the articles about imminent climate change and thinking it's something coming in the future. But now suddenly in this intense heat wave, suddenly the future is here. Boiling summers, floods, droughts are the new normal. All those COP summits and haggling politicians, all that talk of net zero is now out of time. We are past the tipping point. The future is suddenly here, and wow, it's hot and worrying. I don't think it's just me who feels like that either. We were on Hampstead Heath watching the eclipse, and we went round sharing our glasses with those people who didn't have them, because looking at the eclipse through the glasses was so much more spectacular than doing it through the colander. I was chatting to a whole group of youngsters, and they said they'd never been interested in things like eclipses before, but that the combination of the roasting summer and then the drumbeat of accelerating tipping points around the climate had tuned them into the kind of natural world. I've linked in the newsletter to a piece from the New York Times on the tipping points, how the glaciers are melting, the seas are getting hotter, hurricanes are intensifying. All of this happening much, much quicker than scientists expected. There's a GIF link there if you want it. It makes me rather nostalgic for soggy English summers, those Augusts I used to spend largely in the Cotswolds, where the sky was overwhelmingly grey, the vegetation incredibly green. And even if I think back over the last 2 decades where we've gone down to Devon every year surfing with the kids, my memories are really of like drizzle, sweaters, windbreaks, tracksuits and slippers, often 16 degrees in August. And today, with the weather warning flashing up on my laptop, 36 degrees as I do this, I really would take 16 degrees in a heartbeat. I've been feeling a bit nostalgic generally this week, I think, not just because of the weather, but because I've been going through lots of old papers because I'm about to do another big move. And I found all sorts of things, cards from my birthday when I was 20, including one from a friend who's still my great friend now, like 36 years later, CVs I sent out to get my first job, all sorts of hilarious letters and cards. But really poignant are the cards and the letters that we've got from people who are no longer with us. I found a whole load of correspondence from my grandmother, who was incredibly important to me when I was growing up. And she went on writing to me when I went to university, and we kind of always stayed kind of in close touch. And I was thinking about her because she was such an oasis of calm and orderliness, and also kind of such a place of family roots during the chaos of my parents' divorce when I was about 5. and we used to go and stay with her without our parents a lot. And I was thinking about her because I wrote a column for the Telegraph this week about grandparents, which was partly inspired by Aviva Wittenberg-Cox's gorgeous Substack last week about having her 5-year-old grandchild, Zoe, to stay with her. Zoe lives most of the time in Senegal. And Aviva wrote about how honoured she felt to be entrusted with her granddaughter, and also how rare it was amongst her friends and her peers to be allowed to have grandchildren to stay. And now this is something I've also heard from others, which I thought was really sad. I loved going to stay with my own granny. It was such a treat. She'd share stories about the war, rationing, keeping chickens, how she could make one egg feed the entire family by making it into floating island. That's like custard with meringue on the top. I remember playing incredibly competitive backgammon and whist and helping her do the Times crossword. I still can't do it every day. She was amazingly athletic. She could still like play croquet and do handstands in her 90s. She drove a black MG, was one of the first women to study chemistry at Oxford in the 30s. She left before she graduated to marry my grandfather, and she always used to say, "Darling, I never regretted it." But her stories were really important because they made me see that adults came in different varieties, that my parents' perspective wasn't the only one, and that there were many ways to skin a cat, whether that was how you laid the table or what you had for breakfast. It also made me feel very rooted and connected to a much wider family diaspora of cousins, aunts, great aunts, grandfather, etc. And this isn't just about me. I was reading for the Telegraph piece a huge Harvard study which found that children who spend regular time with their grandparents are 30% less likely to have behavioural problems, that being related to these oldies acts as a kind of buffer to stress in young lives. And they also made the kids feel kind of rooted, as I did, part of a broader family and a historical structure. And that really felt right to me. I remember thinking that through my granny, World War II wasn't abstract, but a lived experience. She'd talk about, being there when the Doodlebug bombs were whining over the house while my dad slept in his pram, and what it was like to be in the Blitz, how everyone drank gin and smoked all the time. She used to say, "Why not? If you thought death was imminent and the end of the world was nigh, why shouldn't you have a drink and a fag?" I remember thinking about her and her stories during COVID. It was comforting to know that people I loved had also survived huge upheaval. And maybe I was thinking about her too because it feels like that upheaval is here again with the incredibly hot summer. And I was also thinking about Aviva's lovely grandchild and the week they'd spent together, and then contrasting it with conversations I'd had with other friends about becoming grandparents, which hadn't quite worked out as they thought. One was saying to me she hadn't been allowed to kiss or hold her new grandchild because the millennial parents thought it was unhygienic. That sounded crazy to me, but I've heard that from a lot of people within the Noon groups. Particularly because the Japanese say kinship is skinship. We are each other, and that is about our physical proximity to our kin. And then it all came to a head for me because I had dinner with a mate he'd very much brought up his children by himself. His beloved son had a kid. I hadn't seen him for a while, so I bought some champagne to celebrate him being a grandpa. And then he told me that he wasn't allowed to hold the baby, let alone change its nappy or give it a cuddle, or hadn't even been allowed to wheel it in the pram, and he felt so upset about it. He'd been going up there dutifully to see the baby, who's now nearly 2, and my friend says he's still really held at arm's length. He tried to talk to his son about it, but, was really told to back off, and he didn't want to push it because of the risk of estrangement. And there are very high levels and rising levels of estrangement between millennials and their parents. And I just found it really interesting that the narrative we tend to hear about grandparenting is of grandparents being used as kind of free childcare. But there is also this other narrative of grandparents feeling very excluded from their grandchildren's lives. And of course, they have no rights, which isn't really very much talked about. And anyway, the column I wrote had a huge reaction. On Sunday morning, I've been in doing the comments, and it's really interesting how many people are in this situation. And I think that this matters to all of us because part of the evolutionary reason that women lived long is to kind of help raise the next generation. I know this isn't applicable to all of us. I know about 30% of Queenagers are not mothers, so we're not going to be grandmothers. But I think the piece about it taking a village to raise a child, that the research shows that the little ones need not just their parents, but a cast of loving adults. That's relevant to all of us, because the child-free have nieces and nephews and godchildren. And indeed, by being present in that capacity, as a kind of another adult in a child's life, you hold an incredibly important role. So it's important that we all have those intergenerational links and that we value them. Personally, I've always wanted to be a granny, maybe because I love my own granny so much. And even though my kids are only in their early 20s, I've kind of been looking forward to it. I thought it would be the best bits of being a mum, you know, the hugs, the smiles, the pudgy hand in yours, reading all those old favourite books without the 3 a.m. wake-ups and the tantrums and all the kind of, you know, not so great bits about being a mum. But maybe that's a slightly rose-tinted view. So we've been writing about this, I've launched a survey today. So if you are a grandparent, please do answer the questions in the survey. I'm interested in, you know, how often you see your grandchildren, whether you like to see them more, whether they come and stay with you independently, you know, how you feel about it all. And also, while we're on the subject of grandparenting, which is a kind of slightly older phase of Queenagerhood, I think, we're offering a new 60 plus Queenager circle, which will be designed to discuss, you know, some of this grandparenting stuff, but also how things change in your 60s and 70s in terms of mindset, how we think about success. The circle is going to be hosted by Aviva Wittenberg-Cox and Lucy Ryan, our lovely Cheltenham host, at Aviva's house in Waterloo in London. The first one is in September on the 22nd. It's free to Noon Pro members, 10 quid for standard members, which is just to cover some costs involved in getting the host there and things. And it's going to be capped at only 15, so do sign up quickly if you're interested. And we've also just launched today a great thing for the autumn called Celebrate Yourself, which is a kind of noon day rave, which we've been wanting to do for ages. So I'm really excited about that. That is going to be it's in early October as a kind of Saturday thing, but all the details are on the website. Anyway, thanks for listening to this. I am incredibly hot because I've had to turn off my fan while recording this so that you could actually hear what I was going to say. So I'm going to go, but I hope you have a lovely weekend and stay cool. Take care. Bye.